Welcome to Innovation Inside the Box. Drew Boyd teaches teams, businesses, and governments how to solve tough problems to create a culture of innovation and a flowing pipeline. Innovation Inside the Box features structured creativity and innovation strategies for leaders who want to think differently, be more innovative, implement change, and grow. The conversations you'll hear will help you apply innovation methods to services and processes, overcome resistance to ideas, and create a culture of innovation. Here's your host, Drew Boyd.
Hey, do you do any work in a nonprofit organization? Are you perhaps a volunteer for some charity, or perhaps just donate money to a particular organization? You know, if you're like most people that I know, you have at least some involvement with a nonprofit organization. And the question in this episode simply is this: do charities and nonprofit organizations need to be as creative and innovative as typical for-profit companies? And of course, the short answer is absolutely. They need to be just as innovative and in some ways even more innovative. Think about it. Charities and nonprofits have limited resources. They have constant pressure on their mission. A lot of things going on with nonprofits that don't affect the for-profit sector. And so my counsel to them is always, yes, you need to develop the skills of creativity. And of course, as we know from this podcast and other work, that creativity is a skill that can be learned like any other. So in this episode, let me share with you some ideas about how to apply creativity thinking to a nonprofit organization. Nonprofit organizations should use the same methods that have been found to be so effective in the corporate world, in industry, so to speak. Structured methods like the one I talk about here, SIT, also known as systematic inventive thinking. It's a method based on patterns that mankind has used for thousands of years, and it's formalized in this very accessible and successful model that I've used for many years, and companies around the world now are starting to adopt. A method like SIT helps you break fixedness. And if you recall, fixedness is that cognitive bias that we all have that makes it very, very difficult to see other opportunities than what we know. Fixedness is kind of how we organize our world. And you don't want to get rid of fixedness. You know, it's something that we all have. I have it, you have it. You don't want to get rid of it because that's what you use to make sense of the world. But when you want to be creative and see new opportunities, it's extremely difficult to even recognize your fixedness, let alone break it. And that's where the SIT method shines. It helps you tease out where that fixedness is and then gives you the tools to break it. So let me give you some ideas. First of all, understand that, you know, in my mind, there's not a lot of difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit. They're organizational structures staffed with people, leadership, and workers. They have inflows of resources. They have outflows of output, products, and services. So in many ways, they are identical. They differ, of course, in their tax status. Now, nonprofits also are well known for doing things that are good for the world. And many for-profit companies do that, but especially nonprofits. They should be doing something that is benefiting society as a whole. And there are thousands of them. So let me give you some examples of how to be more creative in the nonprofit sector. And I'm going to draw on some recent experiences that I've had. I recently created an online video course for a nonprofit organization. It was called How to Write a Marketing Plan. And in that, I dealt with some examples and some different charities to call out in that course that I'm going to use here. But I'm also going to call on some other experiences that I've had recently that I think could be of value. Hey, if you're a nonprofit, let's think about the three areas where you really need to shine with innovation. Fundraising. Innovation is going to help you be more creative in terms of how you raise funds. And, you know, raising funds is an essential part of any nonprofit. And it's a competitive world out there. You think for-profit companies have it bad. You know, chasing after donors to donate money is a critical activity. It's an entire career field to itself. So you can be innovative there for sure. Number two is expanding their reach. If you're an organization that is providing value, if you're doing good work, you probably want to expand. You want to cover more of what you do. And then the third is delivering that actual mission. In what you do, you want to do it well, you want to do it creatively, you want to do it resourcefully, and all three areas can benefit by structured creativity methods like SIT. So the three examples that I'm going to call on are, first of all, it's a company called Team Rubicon. Team Rubicon is a nonprofit that helps communities in addressing disasters, humanitarian or natural disasters, but they do it in a very creative way. Team Rubicon does recruiting of former veterans, military veterans, guys and gals that have recently come out of the military and are, still want to serve their country, still want to serve society. And Team Rubicon grabs onto that talent. These are bright people, motivated, disciplined people, and puts them to work when there is a disaster. They take advantage of those military skills and help the veterans still feel valued. It's a wonderful organization, Team Rubicon. Check it out. Now, in terms of how they apply innovation methods, one of the things that's essential for all the organizations is your selection of the closed world. Where are we going to innovate? So if you're at Team Rubicon and you do primarily two things: recruit veterans, and number two, you assist communities with disasters, let's say major flooding. Well, you'd want to focus on one of those, and let's say it's just recruiting. Now, to be successful with the closed world, you'd want to zoom down even further, let's say recruiting from one branch of service, maybe just the Army, and maybe just one particular type of career field in the Army. And so you and your colleagues would zoom down to just that particular closed world and apply a method. Probably in this case, I would recommend the division technique. Division is reorganizing a process, essentially. And a recruiting process is a perfect use of the division technique. And so Team Rubicon, to make sure it has a flowing pipeline of veterans, of talented veterans, can do it creatively by applying the closed world principle and the division technique to see new opportunities. Another organization that I talked about in my course is called the America's Packard Museum. And if you know the word Packard, you'll know that it's the name of an old type of car. It's a car model, a luxury car model. You'll see it in old movies and things like that, or movies about the old days, the 20s and 30s. And the Packard Museum is not far from where I live. It's right up in the road up in Dayton, Ohio. And it is the largest collection of Packard automobiles. It's the repository of all things Packard historically, the family and the company. And it sounds like a great place to visit. It's a museum. And if you're a car nut, it's definitely something you'd want to put on your list. I hope to get up there one day. But like any museum, it's a nonprofit. We have many museums in every city of all types. And so these organizations too need to be creative. So what do you do in the case of a museum? Let's say you're a volunteer in a museum and you want to help generate some creative ideas. Here again, you start with the closed world. Where do you want innovation? It could be, let's say, in curating a display. Let's say there's a particular corner of the Packard Museum. It's maybe how Packard museums were manufactured. So you zoom down on just that well-defined closed world and then apply an SIT technique. In this case, I would probably pull out something like task unification. Task unification is that technique that takes a component and forces you to do something else with that component. And it's a lovely technique, really, really strong technique, especially in a closed world situation. It creates those ideas I call head slappers, right? Like, gee, why did I think of that? It's a great idea. And I could imagine how you would take a corner of the Packard Museum and apply the task unification technique. And essentially what you're doing is you're pulling resources that are in that immediate vicinity and forcing them to tell a story, forcing them to have some relevant and additional role in that particular display. It could be very creative. People want to go to a museum and have fun, and why not do it creatively? But the same thing would apply to any type of display or any type of nonprofit organization that is that is relying on foot traffic, people to come through and visit them. Now, the third organization that I've dealt with in this video course is called the Neuroendocrine Tumor Research Foundation. Neuroendocrine Tumor Research Foundation, and it's a organization that deals with these particular types of cancers. What it does is it's a nonprofit that works to find cures for carcinoid cancer, pancreatic cancer, neuroendocrine cancer, and related diseases. And what they want to do is eliminate the suffering of these patients, their families, their caregivers. So it sponsors research. It collects money and sponsors research by scientists and chemists and laboratories to find cures for these diseases. So, it's a foundation. And like a lot of foundations, they exist to collect money and then sponsor good work, charitable work, or scientific work, or whatever kind of work to address that particular cause. So what do you do in this case? Well, I would believe that the NTRF is faced with issues around which researchers do they want to fund, and how can they fund researchers more creatively. And so once again, it would start with a discussion around the closed world. Where do we want to innovate? You always begin this method with that key question, where do we need innovation? And really zoom it down to a particular well-defined closed world. This is thinking inside the box, right? Forget brainstorming. It doesn't work. It's been shown for 60, 70 years now of research. But inside the box, you're going to get rich ideas. You're going to break fixedness. And this is what's true with the NTRF. I think what I would apply here would be a technique called the attribute dependency technique. I almost lost my train of thought there. Attribute dependency is the one of the 5 techniques that forces you to create a correlation between one attribute and another attribute. As one thing changes, another thing changes. So, for example, think about a funding model at NTRF that is based on attribute dependency. As one thing about the researcher changes, another thing about the funding changes. I don't know. For example, what if they reach a breakthrough, then something changes in terms of their funding? It goes up or it goes down. Maybe something that they add to their research, or maybe something that they reach a milestone in terms of the number of people recruited in their study. And when they reach these thresholds, something changes in their funding, and it becomes a more defined program, more creative in how the money is spent. I don't know. It sounds interesting to me. It's a good technique that we use a lot in pricing situations like this, or funding situations. So that's some ideas about how you would apply the SIT techniques to a nonprofit world, to a charity world. It doesn't matter which charity. The key is, again, deciding on your closed world and looking for ways to break fixedness. And I'm working with an organization now. It deals with people who are blind and visually impaired. And this organization knows that it needs to be more creative. The blind and visually impaired population is huge around the world. And blind people have to deal with a world that is based on sighted individuals, and they have to learn how to adapt. So this organization is doing a great job. It does a particularly good job with Braille. Braille is that structure, that code, that sort of that alphabet that is based on touch. You can touch the Braille and understand the words that are being spelled out or communicated. And you see Braille in many situations. And I believe they're the largest producer of Braille documents in the world. And so they have a big vested interest in Braille. And one of the first things that I'm thinking out loud to myself is, I know where the fixedness is. There's an over-reliance on Braille here. And so in this situation, I'm going to probably reach out for a very simple but powerful technique, in this case, the subtraction technique. Imagine taking Braille out of the equation completely. The people at this organization are probably going to be shocked when they hear that, but that's a key way to get at fixedness, and that's where the subtraction technique really shines. It helps really break your underlying assumptions about what you're doing as a nonprofit. You take something away that is so essential, And what it does, it just forces you to see new opportunities you hadn't thought of. Team Rubicon. Let's imagine taking away veterans. There are no veterans. You're not allowed to recruit them. Okay, well, now what would you do? How would you replace them? Would you go to school teachers, or would you go to another population that you could fulfill the same kind of mission? And what it does, it just opens up new opportunities and new insights that maybe you didn't have before. And I want to close by just thanking all those people like you. If you're involved in a nonprofit, I appreciate what you're doing to change the world, make the world a better place. There's a big part of causes that can be addressed by organizations, for-profit organizations, as well as nonprofit organizations. Really, everybody ought to be chipping in here. And I think one of the things that is clear with the pandemic is that we're all better off together solving the issue. And the same is true with any cause around the world. For-profit, nonprofit, do your little part, and we'll inch forward together. And especially if we get more creative about it, we're going to get that much further all together.